Hello, and welcome to another episode of Glorious Life on Wheels. This is the first in a three-part series on senior poverty in America. In this video, I'm going to talk about some of the challenges that are unique to seniors who are living in poverty in America. In the second in the series, I'm going to talk about ways that the government keeps seniors poor and in poverty. And in the third and possibly fourth in this series, I'm going to talk about ways that seniors, despite living on very low income, can still live a meaningful and fulfilling life. So come on, let's get started, shall we? Being poor in America is no picnic at any age. But being poor and living in America as a senior poses an entirely different set of difficulties and challenges. And quite frankly, it just sucks being a senior living in poverty in America. Based on some of the information that I've read, up to 40% of seniors live on strictly Social Security. They're on a fixed income that goes up very little per year. Based on one report, it says that the average Social Security increase over the last 10 years, I think this was written in 2023, over the prior 10 years, the average increase was 2.6%. Now in 2023, it was 8.7%, but that's the largest it had been since 1982. And I think in 2022, it was 5.9%. That was also considered a very large increase. But think about this. The average is 2.6%, and the average Social Security check is $1,783 per month. That comes to $21,396 a year. But get a load of this. For women, the average, that means there's some higher, but also a number of people lower. The average Social Security check for women is $1,235 per month, which comes out to $14,824 a year. So if you're a senior woman bringing in an average of $1,235 per month, you can't even afford the average one-bedroom apartment in the United States, which is now $1,713. Now, I know a lot of you are going to say, well, there are lower areas. Yeah, there are lower areas and there are higher areas. In New York, I think the average now is about $4,000 for a one-bedroom. And in Wyoming, the average is about $600. But during the winter, your utility bills are going to be quite a bit higher. But let's say you are living in Wyoming or somewhere where your rent is $600 or let's say $700 a month, because that's really low for a one-bedroom apartment. Let's say it's $700 a month. You're bringing in $1,235. After you take the $700 off, you only have $535 left. With that, you have to pay for your utilities, which is gas and electric. If you live in an area that's really hot in the summer, you're going to be running air or you're going to be at risk for heat stroke. Then you have your transportation cost, you have your cost to maintain your vehicle, you have your food, your car insurance, your health insurance comes out of that, your medication, and if you're older, you're going to have more expenses for medication. So with $500 left over to do all of those things, you're in pretty bad shape if you're living in America as a senior living on the average Social Security as a woman at $1,235 per month. Also, records, I think it was from the U.S. Department of Labor, I'm not sure, but people living in poverty and on low incomes spend typically at least 40% or more of their total income on housing. 40% or more. Often it's 50%. Often when I do a video interviewing someone who's a senior living on low income and struggling, I'll get comments like, well, why don't they get a job? Why don't they go out and work? Well, let me tell you something. The older you get, the more physical limitations that you have. You cannot do some of the things that you can do when you were younger. Many people, as they get older, can't stand on their feet for 8 hours a day at a job. Many can't do the kind of heavy lifting that they can do when they were younger. I learned the hard way about some of the physical limitations when I took a long trip, and as a result of driving for long periods of time, I now have a torn tendon in my right Achilles heel, which is causing me major problems. That would never have happened, and I'd done these kind of trips many times when I was a younger person. But there are physical limitations that you just can't do some of the things and work some of the jobs that you could when you were younger. Also, this is something people don't want to talk about, but it is a real fact, and that is there is age discrimination. A lot of employers do not want to hire older workers, which is ridiculous because from what I've seen and read, older workers tend to be more reliable. But a lot of employers are concerned about increased medical cost for older employees. They don't want to pay the employee based on their experience. Often they'd rather hire a younger employee, train them in their way, and actually try and get a return on their investment in the training. But the way young people hop around from job to job now, you really would be better off hiring an older person. And then I've heard the excuse, well, you're overqualified for the job. Now you've got someone who's willing to work for less than they really should be paid, but you don't want to hire them because you don't want to get someone with more skills than you're paying them. That makes no sense. Again, age discrimination in the employment market is just rampant. So there are a host of reasons that older people are limited in their options for employment. Another challenge for seniors living in poverty in America is increased medical cost. Let's face it, as you get older, you have more and more medical challenges. You have more chronic and debilitating diseases. You tend to have more high blood pressure, more heart problems, and a host of other problems. Along with that is increased medication costs. My younger brother, has one medication only, that's $735 a month. Now imagine if you're living on $1,235 a month. You've got to pay for rent, food, all the other assorted costs. And then you have just one of maybe 3 or 4 medications, and one of them is $735 per month. I mean, do I need to say anything else, really? Another factor of living in poverty as a senior is the sense of isolation and loneliness. According to a report that I read that was written, I believe, in 2020, it said that at least 1 in 4 seniors live alone. That's at least 1 in 4. And as women get older, that figure goes up more because women tend to live longer. So they tend, as they get older, to even be more alone and live in situations where they're more isolated. You know, when you're living on a low income, you don't have money to go out. You don't have money to socialize. You don't have money for gas to go even to visit friends or family because you're living really on such a tight budget. All you have money for is absolute necessities. You tend to have less socialization and less community involvement. Also, in a report that I read, it said that one of the results of loneliness is emotional pain. And emotional pain can cause a body response that is actually similar to physical pain, in that it lowers your body's ability to have a strong immune system. It lowers your immunity. I mean, is that just wild? Which puts you at higher risk for illnesses or chronic illness and diseases. So basically, being alone, being isolated, can help contribute to you being sicker. I mean, I'm not making this stuff up. Another report I read, I think it was from the National Library Association or something like that. it said that there's a connection between loneliness and isolation and reduced cognitive functioning and increased dementia. Who knew? But it does make sense. If you have less interaction, if you're talking to people less, if you're using your brain less, that those cognitive functions will decrease. But perhaps the most serious one was an article that was in the Harvard Gazette. I think it was in October of 2023, and it made a connection between early mortality or morbidity rate for people and seniors who are isolated and lonely. So being alone, being by yourself, and you can correlate that to not having the money to go out, to do anything, to travel, to meet with friends, to have a social life, can actually lessen the years in your life. The last impact on seniors who are living in poverty, I believe, is perhaps the most significant, and that is the level of fear that they live in. I get so many emails and comments from seniors telling me how scared they are, that they're not going to be able to pay their rent, that any time they're going to be evicted and put out on the street, that they're not going to be able to pay for their medications that they need, or that they run out of money for food before the end of the month. There's just so much fear that is prevalent among poverty-stricken seniors. I can't tell you also how many have shared with me how afraid they are that when their spouse passes, especially if their spouse is currently ill, that they're not going to be able to maintain their household, that they were barely making it on 2 incomes and going down to 1 Social Security check. They're just living in dread. Not only are they living in dread because they're going to be grieving for the loss of their spouse or their partner, but they have the extra added fear that the loss of their spouse is not just going to be the loss of a loved one, but it's going to be the loss of their home, the loss of the roof over their head. Anyhow, this is what I have to share on this topic. If you have some things that you're going through as a senior living in poverty that I missed, would you share them with us in the comments? And let's have a conversation on this. So stay tuned for part 2 in this series, again, which is going to be how the government keeps seniors in poverty once they are there. I love each and every one of you. I hope your journeys are filled with joy and blessings. And let's get through this together, shall we? All right, until next time.